Across ancient history, mysterious structures, unexplained artifacts, and astonishing engineering continue to challenge modern understanding. From massive stone monuments aligned with celestial movements to underground cities carved with incredible precision, ancient civilizations appear to possess knowledge far beyond what traditional history suggests. Archaeologists uncover new clues every year, yet many questions remain unanswered. How did ancient builders move stones weighing dozens of tons? Why do similar architectural patterns appear in cultures separated by oceans and centuries? These ancient mysteries reveal a forgotten world of advanced skills, lost knowledge, and remarkable human ingenuity. As research continues, each discovery pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about early civilizations. The deeper we explore the past, the more it becomes clear that ancient history still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. Far out in the Bay of Bengal, beyond the busy shipping lanes, and far from the cities of mainland India, lies a small island covered almost entirely in dense jungle. From the air, it appears peaceful, an emerald patch of forest surrounded by bright coral reefs and deep blue water. Yet this island is considered one of the most dangerous places on Earth for outsiders to approach. It is called North Sentinel Island, and unlike almost every other place on the planet, it remains completely closed to the modern world. North Sentinel Island is part of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago, a chain of islands scattered between India and Southeast Asia. While many of the surrounding islands are inhabited and even visited by tourists, North Sentinel is different. The island is home to the Sentinelese, a small indigenous tribe that has lived there in almost total isolation for thousands of years. Anthropologists believe their ancestors may have arrived in the region as early as 50 to 60,000 years ago, possibly among the first human groups to migrate out of Africa. If this is true, the Sentinelese represent one of the oldest continuous human populations on Earth. What makes North Sentinel Island extraordinary is not only the age of its inhabitants, but the fact that they have never integrated with the outside world. While most indigenous societies have had at least some contact with explorers, traders, or neighboring civilizations, the Sentinelese have fiercely resisted every attempt at communication. Over the centuries, ships passing near the island reported seeing figures on the beach holding bows and spears, watching silently as vessels moved through the surrounding waters. Modern encounters have been rare and often tense. When helicopters or boats approach too closely, the Sentinelese are known to respond immediately, raising weapons and firing arrows toward the intruders. Their message is unmistakable: outsiders are not welcome. Because of these reactions, direct contact has almost never been successful, and researchers know remarkably little about the tribe's language, culture, or social structure. Even their population remains uncertain. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 50 and 200 Sentinelese may live on the island, but no reliable census has ever been conducted. Their settlements are believed to consist of small huts and temporary shelters hidden within the thick jungle, making them difficult to observe from the air. What little information exists comes mainly from distant photographs, brief government expeditions in the 20th century, and accidental encounters with fishermen who drifted too close to the island. These encounters have sometimes ended in tragedy. On several occasions, outsiders who reached the shores of North Sentinel Island were attacked and killed by the tribe. One of the most widely reported incidents occurred in 2018, when an American missionary attempted to land on the island in hopes of making contact. Shortly after stepping onto the beach, he was killed by Sentinelese warriors. The event reinforced the long-standing rule imposed by the Indian government no one is allowed to approach the island. Today, Indian authorities enforce a strict exclusion zone of several kilometers around North Sentinel Island. Patrol boats monitor the waters to prevent fishermen, tourists, or curious explorers from getting too close. The purpose of this protection is not only to safeguard outsiders, but also to protect the Sentinelese themselves. Because they have lived in isolation for so long, their immune systems have never been exposed to many diseases common in the outside world. Even a simple infection such as influenza could spread rapidly and potentially wipe out the entire community. For this reason, many anthropologists argue that leaving the Sentinelese alone is the only ethical option. Their isolation has preserved a way of life that may resemble that of ancient human societies thousands of years ago. They hunt with bows, gather food from the forest, and fish in the shallow reefs that surround the island. From satellite images, researchers can sometimes see dugout canoes resting along the shoreline, small vessels used to travel short distances through the lagoon, but rarely far enough to leave the protective barrier of coral reefs. The island itself also plays a role in maintaining this isolation. North Sentinel is ringed by dangerous reefs that make navigation difficult for larger boats. The dense rainforest that covers its interior further hides any settlements from outside view. Combined with the tribe's defensive stance, these natural barriers have helped keep the island effectively sealed off from the rest of the world. One of the most remarkable moments in the island's recent history occurred after the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. The massive waves destroyed communities across Southeast Asia and the Andaman Islands, and for a time, scientists feared the Sentinelese might have been wiped out. When a reconnaissance helicopter flew over the island days later, however, a tribesman appeared on the beach and shot arrows toward the aircraft. The encounter confirmed that the community had survived the disaster, suggesting they either moved to higher ground before the waves arrived or possessed knowledge that helped them recognize the warning signs of the approaching tsunami. This moment highlighted just how resilient and self-sufficient the Sentinelese appear to be. Despite having no modern technology, no contact with global civilization, and no access to outside resources, they have managed to survive on the same island for countless generations. Their society continues to function in a way that remains largely invisible to the outside world. In a time when satellites map every corner of the Earth and communication networks connect nearly every community, North Sentinel Island stands as a rare exception. It is one of the last places where humanity's ancient past still exists in near-complete isolation. No researchers have studied its language. No historians know its traditions. No archaeologists have uncovered the full story of how its people have endured there for so long. Because of this, the island has become a symbol of a boundary that modern civilization has chosen not to cross. Rather than forcing contact or attempting to integrate the Sentinelese into the outside world, authorities have decided that their independence must be respected. The island remains off-limits, its beaches untouched by tourism, and its forests unexplored by science. For travelers and explorers, the rule is simple. North Sentinel Island is a place humans should not set foot. Not because it hides supernatural dangers or deadly environments, but because it is home to a community that has chosen clearly and consistently to remain alone. And perhaps that is what makes North Sentinel Island so extraordinary. In an age where almost every mystery has been mapped, photographed, and documented, this small island in the Bay of Bengal reminds us that there are still places where the modern world stops and where another human story continues unseen. Deep within the vast and unforgiving expanse of the Karakum Desert, where winds sweep across endless dunes and the landscape appears almost lifeless, there exists a phenomenon that feels more like something from ancient myth than modern reality. In the middle of this remote desert burns a massive crater of fire that has never stopped blazing. Flames rise from the earth itself, illuminating the night sky and casting a haunting glow across the surrounding sand. Locals and travelers alike have given it a name that captures both its appearance and its atmosphere, the door to hell. The site is officially known as the Darvaza gas crater, yet the dramatic nickname has become far more famous. Standing at the edge of the crater, the site is almost surreal. The ground opens into a vast, circular pit filled with hundreds of constantly burning flames. From above, it looks like a glowing wound in the surface of the planet, as though the Earth itself has been torn open to reveal an ocean of fire beneath. The crater stretches roughly 70 meters across and descends more than 20 meters into the ground. Along the interior walls and across the floor of the pit, countless vents release methane gas from deep underground. Each vent feeds a flickering flame, and together they form a chaotic landscape of fire that never settles and never disappears. Heat rises in powerful waves from the crater, distorting the air above it and making the surrounding desert shimmer. What makes this place truly remarkable is that it is not the result of a volcano or a naturally occurring lava flow. Instead, the origins of the door to hell can be traced back to a single human decision made more than half a century ago. In the early 1970s, geologists from the Soviet Union were exploring the region in search of natural gas reserves. The Karakum Desert sits above enormous underground deposits of methane, making it an attractive area for energy exploration. During one of their drilling operations, the ground beneath their equipment suddenly collapsed. The drilling platform and surrounding earth fell into a large underground cavity, creating a massive crater. The collapse exposed a pocket of methane gas that immediately began leaking into the atmosphere. Methane can be extremely dangerous when released in large quantities. It is highly flammable and can also pose environmental and health risks if allowed to spread unchecked. The scientists faced a difficult situation. Allowing the gas to continue escaping into the air could have been hazardous, but containing it underground was not immediately possible. Their solution seemed simple at the time. They decided to ignite the gas. The plan was straightforward. By burning the methane, the gas would be consumed quickly and safely. The scientists believed the fire would last only a few days, perhaps a week at most, until the underground supply was exhausted. But the fire did not fade. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years. Instead of extinguishing itself, the crater continued to burn. The pocket of methane beneath the desert turned out to be far larger than anyone had anticipated. New gas constantly rises from deep underground, feeding the flames that dance across the crater floor. The result is a fire that has now been burning for more than 5 decades, transforming an accidental collapse into one of the most extraordinary landscapes on Earth. During the daytime, the crater appears as a vast pit, scorched by heat and lined with darkened rock. But when night falls over the desert, the scene becomes something entirely different. Hundreds of flames illuminate the interior of the crater, casting a brilliant orange glow that can be seen from far across the sand. With no cities or artificial lights nearby, the burning crater becomes the brightest object in the entire region. Visitors who have traveled to this remote location often describe an eerie experience. Standing near the rim of the crater, they can hear the constant hiss of gas escaping through underground vents. The sound is steady and relentless, like the breath of something enormous, hidden beneath the earth. The heat is intense, even several meters away from the edge, and looking down into the crater feels almost hypnotic as the flames twist and surge in unpredictable patterns. It is easy to understand why the site earned its ominous nickname. Despite its dramatic appearance, the door to hell is not merely a curiosity. Beneath the crater lies an immense reservoir of natural gas, a resource that holds significant economic value. For years, the government of Turkmenistan has considered the possibility of extinguishing the flames in order to capture and use the methane for energy production. However, stopping the fire is far more complicated than lighting it. The geological structure beneath the crater is complex, and the gas reservoir appears to extend far beyond the visible pit. Attempting to seal the crater could cause methane to escape through new cracks in the desert floor, potentially creating even more dangerous conditions. Because of these uncertainties, the fire has been allowed to continue burning. Over time, the crater has become one of the most surreal sights on the planet. In a world where satellites have mapped nearly every corner of the Earth, the door to hell still feels strangely primordial. It is a reminder that beneath the thin crust of the planet lies immense energy, capable of transforming the landscape in ways both beautiful and terrifying. Yet despite its allure, the crater remains a place that demands caution. The edges of the pit are not perfectly stable, and the ground around it can shift unexpectedly. Temperatures near the rim are extremely high, and the flames below burn intensely enough to make rescue nearly impossible if someone were to fall inside. Combined with the harsh environment of the Karakum Desert itself, the site is not a location where humans should wander carelessly. The desert surrounding the crater is one of the most inhospitable regions in Central Asia. Summer temperatures can rise above 40 degrees Celsius, and water sources are scarce across the vast landscape. Reaching the site requires traveling long distances across remote terrain, far from major cities or reliable infrastructure. All of these factors contribute to the sense that the door to hell is not meant to be approached lightly. And yet the flames continue to burn. Night after night, year after year, the crater glows against the darkness of the desert. What began as a scientific miscalculation has become a permanent feature of the landscape, a blazing reminder of both the power of nature and the unpredictable consequences of human intervention. In the silence of the Karakum Desert, as the wind moves slowly across the sand, the fire beneath the earth still roars quietly. And for anyone standing at the edge of the crater, staring into the swirling inferno below, it is difficult to shake the feeling that the ground itself has opened, revealing a doorway into something far deeper than the desert above. Far from the mainland coast of Belize, surrounded by the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea, lies a perfectly circular void that appears almost unnatural from the sky. At first glance, it looks like a dark blue eye staring up from the ocean floor. This formation is known as the Great Blue Hole, one of the most famous marine sinkholes on Earth. From above, it is breathtakingly beautiful, but beneath its calm surface lies a submerged world that is far more hostile, mysterious, and dangerous than its tranquil appearance suggests. The Great Blue Hole measures roughly 300 meters across and plunges more than 100 meters deep. Unlike most underwater formations, this enormous cavity was not created beneath the sea. Instead, it began its life as a vast limestone cave system during the last ice age, when global sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. At that time, much of what is now the Caribbean Sea was exposed land. Rainwater slowly dissolved the limestone bedrock, carving out enormous underground chambers and tunnels beneath the surface. Over thousands of years, stalactites grew from the ceilings of these caverns, forming massive stone spikes that could only develop in dry air. Then, the climate changed. As glaciers melted at the end of the Ice Age, sea levels began to rise. Slowly but relentlessly, the ocean flooded the ancient caves. The chambers collapsed in places, creating a vast, circular sinkhole. Eventually, the entire system disappeared beneath the rising sea. What remained was the Great Blue Hole, a geological relic of a world that existed tens of thousands of years before modern civilization. For decades, the true nature of the Blue Hole remained largely unknown. From the surface, it looked like a simple, deep pit in the ocean. But when divers first began exploring its depths, they discovered something astonishing. Suspended far below the surface were gigantic stalactites, stone formations that should never exist underwater. Some of them stretch more than 10 meters in length and weigh several tons. Their presence confirms that the cave once stood high and dry long before the sea swallowed it. Descending into the Blue Hole is like traveling backward in geological time. Near the surface, sunlight penetrates the water, illuminating coral reefs and schools of tropical fish that circle the rim of the sinkhole. But as divers move deeper, the environment changes rapidly. The light fades, the temperature drops, and the walls of the sinkhole become steep and dark. By the time explorers reach depths of around 40 meters, the reef life disappears and the entrance to the ancient cavern system becomes visible. Inside these massive chambers, the silence is overwhelming. Huge stalactites hang from the rock ceiling like the remains of an underground cathedral. Divers who have visited the site often describe the feeling as surreal, an eerie sense that they are floating through a space that was never meant to exist beneath the sea. These formations were created drop by drop over thousands of years, yet today they are suspended in darkness beneath an ocean that arrived long after their formation. But the deeper one goes, the more hostile the environment becomes. At depths of roughly 90 meters, the water chemistry begins to change dramatically. Oxygen levels drop to almost nothing, creating a suffocating environment where most marine life cannot survive. Even more unsettling is the presence of hydrogen sulfide, a toxic chemical that forms a thick, cloudy layer within the water column. Divers describe it as a ghostly, white fog drifting through the darkness. Below this chemical boundary lies what scientists sometimes refer to as a dead zone. The water beneath this layer contains almost no oxygen, making it nearly impossible for fish or other complex organisms to survive. The deeper regions of the Blue Hole are therefore strangely empty, silent, and lifeless. Only scattered shells, sediment, and ancient debris rest on the floor of the submerged cavern. Because of these conditions, the bottom of the Great Blue Hole has remained largely unexplored for much of human history. Only with modern technology have scientists begun to investigate its deepest layers. In recent years, specialized submersibles and robotic exploration vehicles have descended into the darkness, mapping the interior and collecting sediment samples from the ocean floor. These samples have revealed something remarkable. The sediments trapped within the Blue Hole act like a geological archive, preserving records of ancient storms, climate changes, and environmental shifts that occurred thousands of years ago. Layer by layer, the deposits tell the story of the planet's changing climate, offering clues about how sea levels rose and how powerful hurricanes shaped the Caribbean long before written history began. Yet despite decades of exploration, much about the Blue Hole remains unknown. The interior cave system is complex, and some areas appear to contain additional chambers and passages that have not yet been fully mapped. Visibility at great depth is extremely limited, and the dangerous chemical layers make exploration difficult even with advanced equipment. For divers, the Great Blue Hole is both a dream and a danger. It has become one of the most famous dive sites in the world, attracting adventurers eager to descend into its mysterious depths. But the same conditions that make it fascinating also make it deadly. Deep diving requires precise planning, specialized equipment, and strict time limits. A small mistake at such depths can quickly become fatal. Several accidents over the years have reinforced the reputation of the Blue Hole as a place that demands absolute respect. Nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, and decompression sickness are constant risks during deep dives. Combined with darkness, limited visibility, and disorienting cavern structures, the environment can overwhelm even experienced divers. From the sky, however, the Blue Hole remains deceptively peaceful. Tourists flying above Belize often marvel at its nearly perfect circular shape, an enormous navy-colored disk surrounded by bright coral reefs. It is so visually striking that it almost appears artificial, as if someone carved a giant hole in the ocean. But the truth is far older and far stranger. The Great Blue Hole is not merely a geological curiosity. It is the drowned remains of an ancient cave system that existed long before the modern coastline formed. Hidden beneath the sea are stone formations that grew in a world without oceans, chambers carved during a time when ice dominated the planet, and sediments that record thousands of years of climate history. In many ways, the Blue Hole is less like a dive site and more like a time capsule, one that preserves a chapter of Earth's past that few places on the planet can still reveal. Yet, it is also a reminder that some environments remain fundamentally hostile to human exploration. Beneath the tranquil Caribbean waters lies a vertical abyss filled with darkness, toxic chemistry, and silent stone structures formed in a forgotten age. And that is why, despite its beauty, the Great Blue Hole remains a place where humans must tread carefully. Because beyond the bright blue surface is a submerged world that was never meant for us, a drowned cave from the Ice Age, waiting in silence at the bottom of the sea. Deep inside the ruined structure of Chernobyl nuclear power plant, hidden beneath layers of collapsed concrete and steel, lies one of the most dangerous remnants ever created by human technology. It is known as the Elephant's Foot, a massive formation of solidified nuclear material that was born during the chaos of the Chernobyl disaster in the Soviet Union in what is now Ukraine. Unlike ruins left behind by ancient civilizations, the Elephant's Foot is not a monument, an artifact, or a relic intentionally created by people. Instead, it is the hardened residue of a catastrophic chain of events that unfolded when reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl facility exploded during a late-night safety test in April of 1986. Within seconds, the reactor core was torn apart. The explosion released enormous amounts of heat, radiation, and debris into the surrounding structure, transforming one of the most advanced nuclear facilities of its time into a burning industrial ruin. In the moments after the explosion, temperatures inside the destroyed reactor rose to extreme levels that far exceeded anything the reactor had been designed to withstand. Nuclear fuel rods began to melt. The metal structures supporting the reactor softened and collapsed. Protective barriers failed as the intense heat spread through the facility. Even the thick concrete floors designed to contain the reactor began to weaken under the pressure of the molten core. As the fuel melted, it mixed with steel, zirconium, sand, graphite, and concrete from the reactor structure. The result was a glowing radioactive substance known as corium, a material that behaves in some ways like volcanic lava, but is far more dangerous due to the presence of nuclear fuel and radioactive isotopes. This molten mixture slowly burned through equipment and barriers as it moved downward through the damaged building. Witnesses later described the substance as resembling a slow-moving river of glowing magma. It flowed through pipes, corridors, and service tunnels, gradually descending into the lower levels beneath the reactor. When the molten material eventually cooled and hardened, it left behind strange formations throughout the basement areas of the plant. Among these formations, one stood out above all the others. In a corridor beneath the destroyed reactor, investigators eventually discovered a massive wrinkled block of solidified corium. Its cracked surface and rounded shape reminded workers of the skin of a giant animal's foot. Because of this unusual appearance, the formation became known as the elephant's foot. But the name, almost humorous at first glance, concealed a terrifying reality. When scientists first measured the radiation near the elephant's foot, the results were staggering. Radiation levels in the area were estimated to reach approximately 10,000 roentgens per hour. At that intensity, a person exposed to the radiation would receive a lethal dose in a matter of minutes. Even standing nearby for a very short time could cause severe radiation sickness damage to the nervous system and irreversible harm to internal organs. Approaching the object required extraordinary precautions. Cleanup crews working inside the destroyed reactor building were forced to limit their time near the formation to mere moments. Protective suits offered only minimal shielding against such extreme radiation. Even electronic equipment struggled to function in the environment. Cameras malfunctioned, radiation detectors behaved unpredictably, and photographic film often appeared distorted after exposure. One of the most famous photographs of the elephant's foot was taken by nuclear radiation specialist Artur Korniev, who participated in several missions inside the damaged reactor structure. By the time he captured the image, nearly a decade had passed since the disaster. Yet the radiation in the area remained powerful enough to damage the camera equipment and degrade the resulting photograph. The image shows a massive, irregular mass that looks almost like hardened lava or melted glass. Its surface appears cracked and folded with strange textures that resemble both geological rock formations and industrial slag. It is an object that seems both natural and unnatural at the same time, a substance that should never have existed under normal circumstances. In the years immediately following the disaster, the elephant's foot was still producing intense heat. Radioactive decay within the corium continued to release energy, causing the formation to remain warm for a long time after it had solidified. Scientists studying the area observed faint heat waves and occasional condensation forming around the surface of the mass, suggesting that the material was still slowly reacting internally. Further analysis of smaller corium samples revealed that the substance was an extremely complex mixture of materials. Uranium fuel particles were embedded in a glass-like matrix formed from melted concrete and sand. Metallic fragments were trapped within the hardened structure, while radioactive isotopes continued to decay deep inside the formation. The resulting material was both chemically unstable and dangerously radioactive. The elephant's foot also became a symbol of how close the disaster had come to becoming even worse. During the meltdown, scientists feared that the molten core might burn through the floor of the reactor and reach groundwater beneath the facility. If molten nuclear fuel had come into contact with large quantities of water, it could have triggered a massive steam explosion capable of spreading radioactive material across a much wider region. Fortunately, the corium eventually cooled and hardened before such an event occurred. The elephant's foot came to rest in the basement corridors, where it remains to this day. Over the decades that followed, the radiation emitted by the formation has gradually decreased as radioactive isotopes decay over time. While the elephant's foot is no longer as instantly lethal as it once was, it still represents a significant hazard inside the reactor building. In the early 21st century, engineers constructed a colossal protective structure known as the New Safe Confinement over the remains of the destroyed reactor. This enormous steel arch now covers the entire site, sealing the contaminated ruins beneath it and helping prevent further radioactive release into the surrounding environment. Hidden under that immense shelter deep inside the wreckage of reactor number 4, the elephant's foot still rests where the molten core finally stopped flowing decades ago. It is no longer glowing or moving, but it remains one of the most extraordinary byproducts of a nuclear disaster ever observed. Few places on Earth demonstrate the destructive potential of human technology as clearly as this silent formation beneath the Chernobyl reactor. It is not merely a piece of radioactive debris. It is a frozen moment in history, a physical reminder of the night when a reactor meltdown reshaped an entire region and forced thousands of people to abandon their homes forever. Today, the elephant's foot remains largely untouched, sealed away within one of the most contaminated structures ever built by humans. It is unlikely that anyone will ever attempt to remove it. The risks involved are simply too great, and the object itself serves as an enduring warning. For historians, engineers, and scientists, the elephant's foot represents the ultimate symbol of nuclear catastrophe. For the rest of the world, it stands as a stark reminder that some places created by human mistakes are simply too dangerous to approach. Deep within the silent ruins of Chernobyl, where radiation still lingers and time seems suspended, the elephant's foot remains exactly where the molten heart of a reactor finally came to rest, an unnatural monument marking one of the most powerful technological disasters in modern history and a place where humans were never meant to stand. In the most remote and unforgiving continent on Earth, where temperatures can plunge far below freezing and the landscape appears frozen in permanent silence, there is a place where the ice itself seems to bleed. Hidden within the barren expanse of Antarctica's McMurdo Dry Valleys, a region often described as the closest environment on Earth to the surface of Mars, lies one of the planet's most unsettling natural phenomena. From the face of a massive glacier, a dark red liquid slowly seeps out of the ice and spills onto the white, frozen ground below. Against the endless field of pale blue and white, the sight is striking, almost disturbing, like a wound carved into the glacier itself. This place is known as Blood Falls. Blood Falls emerges from the front of Taylor Glacier, a massive river of ancient ice that has been slowly creeping through the Antarctic landscape for tens of thousands of years. At first glance, the red flow appears almost impossible to explain. Early explorers who first documented the phenomenon in the early 20th century believed the color might be caused by red algae growing in the water. But as scientists studied the site more closely over the decades, they discovered that the explanation was far stranger and far more fascinating than anyone had expected. The crimson color of Blood Falls comes from a hidden source deep beneath the glacier, a reservoir of extremely salty water trapped under hundreds of meters of ice. This ancient brine has been isolated from the outside world for an estimated 1 to 2 million years. Unlike ordinary fresh water, this trapped liquid contains enormous concentrations of dissolved salts and iron. Because of its salinity, the water remains liquid, even in temperatures well below the normal freezing point. When the pressurized brine slowly forces its way upward through fractures and crevasses in the glacier, it eventually reaches the surface. The moment it touches the oxygen in the air, a chemical reaction begins. The dissolved iron in the water rapidly oxidizes, forming iron oxide, the same compound commonly known as rust. Within seconds, the once clear liquid turns a deep red, staining the surrounding ice with streaks that resemble blood flowing from the glacier's interior. Yet the strange color is only part of the mystery. Hidden within this isolated underground system is something far more remarkable. Despite being sealed beneath thick Antarctic ice for perhaps millions of years, the brine is not lifeless. Instead, it contains a community of microscopic organisms that have survived in total darkness, without oxygen, and in water so salty and cold that it would kill most forms of life on Earth. These microorganisms survive through an unusual metabolic process. Rather than relying on sunlight or oxygen, they extract energy from chemical reactions between iron sulfur and other minerals dissolved in the water. This process, known as chemosynthesis, allows life to exist in an environment that would otherwise appear completely uninhabitable. The discovery stunned scientists. It revealed that life can survive in conditions far more extreme than previously imagined. In fact, blood falls quickly became one of the most important natural laboratories for studying how organisms might exist in environments beyond Earth. The landscape surrounding blood falls adds another layer of isolation and danger. The McMurdo dry valleys, where the glacier is located, are among the driest places on the planet. Despite being part of Antarctica, the region receives almost no snowfall, and powerful katabatic winds sweep down from the polar plateau, stripping moisture from the land. The result is a cold desert of rock dust and ancient ice, a place so hostile that very few forms of life exist there at all. Within this environment, the glacier itself is riddled with hidden crevasses, deep fractures that cut through the ice like invisible traps. Some are narrow and difficult to detect from the surface, while others plunge dozens of meters downward into the frozen interior of the glacier. These crevasse zones form part of the hidden plumbing system that allows the ancient brine beneath the glacier to move slowly through the ice before finally emerging at Blood Falls. Scientists studying the glacier have discovered that the flow of the red brine is not constant. Instead, it moves through an intricate network of channels within the ice, occasionally releasing bursts of liquid that spill onto the glacier's surface. Over time, these flows stain the surrounding ice with dark red patterns that can spread across the frozen landscape. Reaching Blood Falls is itself an extraordinary challenge. The site is located thousands of kilometers from the nearest permanent human settlements and can only be accessed through carefully organized scientific expeditions. Even then, the harsh Antarctic environment means researchers must operate under strict safety conditions. Extreme cold, unpredictable weather, and unstable ice make the region one of the most dangerous environments on Earth. For this reason, Blood Falls remains largely untouched by ordinary human visitors. It is not a tourist destination, and access to the site is tightly controlled to protect both the fragile environment and the scientific research taking place there. But beyond the physical dangers, Blood Falls also raises profound scientific questions. If microscopic life can survive sealed beneath Antarctic ice for millions of years, feeding on chemical reactions in darkness, then similar life forms might exist in other frozen worlds across the solar system. Scientists often point to places like Mars, where ancient evidence suggests that salty liquid water may once have existed beneath the planet's surface. Others look to the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, such as Europa and Enceladus, where vast oceans are believed to lie hidden beneath thick layers of ice. The conditions beneath Taylor Glacier may represent one of the closest analogues on Earth to those distant environments. In this sense, Blood Falls is more than just a strange red waterfall in Antarctica. It is a window into hidden ecosystems that exist far beyond the reach of sunlight and possibly far beyond our own planet. Standing before the glacier, watching the red liquid slowly emerge from the ancient ice, it is difficult not to feel a sense of unease. The sight challenges our expectations of what ice water and life should look like. A frozen landscape that appears silent and lifeless suddenly reveals movement, chemistry, and hidden biology unfolding deep beneath the surface. Places like Blood Falls remind us that some parts of our planet remain profoundly alien. Beneath the ice of Antarctica lie environments that humans can barely explore, let alone inhabit. They are worlds defined by darkness, pressure, and extreme cold conditions that push the limits of survival. And while scientists continue to study this remarkable phenomenon, one thing is certain. In a place where the ice itself seems to bleed, nature is still revealing secrets that humanity has only just begun to understand. Long before it became associated with nuclear weapons, Bikini Atoll was a quiet ring of coral islands scattered across the blue waters of the Pacific Ocean. Located in the Marshall Islands, the atoll was once home to a small community that lived among coconut trees, fishing lagoons, and coral reefs that had formed over thousands of years. From above, it looked like a perfect tropical paradise, a narrow necklace of land surrounding a calm turquoise lagoon. For generations, the people of Bikini lived in relative isolation from the outside world, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the ocean and the traditions of their ancestors. Everything changed in 1946 when the United States selected Bikini Atoll as the site for a series of nuclear weapons tests. The Second World War had ended only months earlier, and the world had just witnessed the devastating power of atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, military planners wanted to understand exactly what these weapons could do not only to cities, but also to fleets of ships and entire environments. Before the tests began, the residents of Bikini were asked to leave their homeland. They were told the relocation would be temporary and that their sacrifice would help bring about a safer future for humanity. Trusting those promises, the islanders agreed to move. In reality, most of them would never be able to return permanently. The first experiments began with Operation Crossroads in 1946. In preparation for the test, the United States assembled a ghost fleet of more than 90 decommissioned warships inside Bikini Lagoon. Battleships, aircraft carriers, submarines, and captured vessels from Germany and Japan were anchored in formation across the water. These ships were not meant to fight. They were targets. When the first atomic bomb detonated above the lagoon, the explosion produced a blinding flash, followed by a rising mushroom cloud that towered into the sky. The shockwave tore through the fleet, throwing ships aside like toys. Some were instantly destroyed. Others remained afloat, but were heavily contaminated with radioactive fallout. Later that same year, a second test detonated underwater. The result was one of the most dramatic explosions ever filmed. A colossal column of water shot thousands of feet into the air, carrying with it tons of radioactive debris. Waves slammed into nearby vessels while a cloud of contaminated mist spread across the lagoon. But the most infamous moment in Bikini Atoll's history would come years later. On March 1, 1954, the United States conducted a thermonuclear test known as Castle Bravo. Scientists expected a powerful explosion, but what occurred exceeded their predictions. When the device detonated, it released an energy equivalent to 15 megatons of TNT, making it one of the most powerful nuclear explosions ever triggered by the United States. Within seconds, the fireball expanded across the sky. The explosion vaporized part of the coral reef and carved a massive crater into the atoll. The mushroom cloud rose more than 40 kilometers into the atmosphere, spreading radioactive particles across a vast area of the Pacific. What made the event even more alarming was that the blast had been far stronger than scientists anticipated. Winds carried radioactive fallout across nearby islands and even onto a Japanese fishing vessel operating far from the test site. Crew members were exposed to dangerous radiation, and many people living on surrounding islands became sick in the days that followed. In the lagoon itself, the explosion permanently reshaped the landscape. The detonation left behind a crater nearly 2 kilometers wide and dozens of meters deep. Coral reefs that had taken millennia to form were instantly destroyed. Between 1946 and 1958, a total of 23 nuclear weapons were detonated in and around Bikini Atoll. Some were dropped from aircraft. Others were exploded underwater or on the surface. Each test added more radioactive contamination to the fragile ecosystem. Even after the explosions stopped, the danger did not disappear. Radioactive isotopes such as cesium-137 and strontium-90 settled into the soil and vegetation. Coconut trees absorbed these elements through their roots, allowing radiation to enter the local food chain. Scientists later discovered that living on the island for extended periods could expose people to unsafe levels of radiation. Several attempts were made to resettle Bikini in later decades, but many residents had to leave again when radiation levels were found to remain too high. For the original inhabitants and their descendants, Bikini Atoll became a homeland that existed more in memory than in reality. Today, the lagoon tells a strange and haunting story. Beneath its clear blue waters lies a silent fleet of warships scattered across the seabed, relics of the early nuclear age. Some vessels are still recognizable, their hulls slowly corroding in the salt water. For experienced deep-sea divers, the site has become one of the most unusual underwater wreck locations in the world. Yet despite the beauty of the surrounding ocean, Bikini Atoll remains a reminder of how profoundly human technology can alter a place. The coral islands that once supported a small island community were transformed into a testing ground for weapons capable of destroying entire cities. In recognition of this history, the Bikini Atoll nuclear test site was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2010. The designation does not celebrate the explosions that occurred there. Instead, it preserves the site as a historical record of the nuclear age, a symbol of the moment when humanity first gained the ability to reshape the planet with unimaginable force. Seen from space today, Bikini Atoll still appears beautiful, a ring of pale sand islands surrounding a turquoise lagoon in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But beneath that calm surface lies the legacy of the most powerful weapons ever tested on Earth. It is a place where paradise and catastrophe share the same horizon, and a powerful reminder that some places on our planet carry histories so dangerous that they were never meant for human footsteps again. In the vast waters of the North Atlantic, just off the southern coast of Iceland, there is a place that almost no human is allowed to visit. It is not guarded by walls, armies, or warning signs. Instead, it is protected by something far more unusual, a global scientific agreement that this land must remain untouched. This place is Surtsey, one of the youngest islands on Earth and one of the rarest natural laboratories in existence. Unlike most islands whose origins are buried deep in geological time, Surtsey was born in front of human eyes. Scientists watched it rise from the ocean, measured its growth, and continue to observe how life slowly begins to colonize a landscape that did not exist just decades ago. But precisely because of this extraordinary origin, Surtsey has become a place where humans are no longer welcome. The story of Surtsey began on the morning of November 14th, 1963. Fishermen sailing through the cold waters south of Iceland suddenly noticed that something unusual on the horizon. A dark column of smoke and steam was rising from the ocean's surface. At first, many believed a ship had exploded or that an underwater accident had occurred. But what they were witnessing was far more dramatic, a submarine volcanic eruption powerful enough to tear open the sea floor. Beneath the surface, molten magma was forcing its way upward through layers of oceanic crust. As the magma collided with seawater, violent explosions sent ash steam and volcanic debris thousands of meters into the air. Within days, the eruption became so intense that black volcanic material began piling up above the waterline. For the first time, a brand new island was emerging from the sea. The island was later named Surtsey, after Surtur, the fire giant, from Norse mythology, who was believed to bring flames at the end of the world. The name seemed fitting. For months, the ocean boiled with volcanic activity as lava fountains and ash clouds reshaped the newborn land. By the time the eruption finally ended in 1967, Surtsey had grown into a solid island of hardened lava and volcanic rock. It measured several square kilometers in size and stood dramatically above the surrounding ocean. What had once been empty sea was now a rugged black landscape of fresh geological creation. But the island's true importance was not its size, its dramatic appearance, or even the eruption that created it. Its importance was timing. Never before in modern scientific history had researchers been able to witness the birth of an island from the very beginning. That meant something extraordinary was now possible. Scientists could observe step by step how life begins on completely new land. In most places on Earth, ecosystems are already ancient and complex. Plants, insects, animals, and microorganisms have interacted for thousands or even millions of years. Untangling how these systems originally formed is extremely difficult. Surtsey changed that. Because the island began as sterile volcanic rock, it allowed researchers to study exactly how life colonizes a blank landscape. But for this experiment to work, one condition was absolutely necessary. Humans had to stay away. Shortly after the island stabilized, the Icelandic government declared Surtsey a strictly protected scientific reserve. Only a very small number of researchers would ever be allowed to land there, and even they had to follow extremely strict rules designed to prevent contamination. Every visit required careful inspection. Equipment had to be cleaned. Food and materials were tightly controlled. Scientists even had to ensure that seeds, insects, or foreign organisms were not accidentally introduced. The goal was simple. The island had to evolve naturally. No tourists, no settlements, and no human interference. Because even something as small as a stray seed carried in a pocket could permanently alter the natural process scientists were trying to observe. At first, Surtsey appeared completely lifeless. The landscape was little more than black volcanic sand, sharp lava fields, and steaming rock. There was no soil, no vegetation, and no visible sign of life. But nature rarely waits long. The first arrivals were microscopic. Wind carried bacteria and fungal spores across the ocean. These microorganisms began settling into cracks in the volcanic rock, forming the earliest invisible communities. Soon after, hardy pioneers like mosses and lichens appeared, slowly clinging to the barren surface. Birds were the next visitors. Seabirds flying across the North Atlantic began landing on the island's cliffs. Some simply rested, but others eventually started nesting. And with them came something that would dramatically accelerate ecological change: nutrients. Bird droppings enriched the sterile volcanic ground, creating the first patches of fertile soil. Seeds carried in feathers or stomachs began to sprout. Slowly, the dark volcanic island started to turn green. Grasses appeared, small plants followed, and insects arrived carried by wind currents or drifting debris. Within a few decades, what had once been a lifeless volcanic scar began transforming into a functioning ecosystem. Today, Surtsey hosts dozens of plant species and supports nesting colonies of seabirds. Insects, microbes, and complex biological networks are continuing to develop. Scientists still visit the island periodically to monitor these changes, documenting how ecosystems grow from absolute beginnings. Yet despite this gradual growth of life, the island itself is slowly disappearing. When Surtsey first formed, much of its structure consisted of loose volcanic ash and fragile rock created during explosive eruptions. Over time, powerful North Atlantic waves have relentlessly eroded these materials. Storms carve away cliffs, while ocean swells grind down the coastline. The island that once covered more than 2.5 square kilometers has already shrunk significantly, and geologists believe that much of it may eventually vanish beneath the sea. Only the hardest lava core may survive for centuries. In this way, Surtsey represents both the birth and the slow erosion of land, a complete geological life cycle unfolding within human history. The island's importance to science has been so profound that in 2008 it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Researchers from around the world recognize it as one of the most valuable natural laboratories on Earth. Few places allow humanity to observe such a fundamental process, the formation of land, followed by the gradual arrival of life. But this value also explains why most people will never set foot there. Unlike many remote locations that are dangerous because of radiation, extreme environments, or hostile conditions, Surtsey is forbidden for a different reason. It is not too deadly for humans. Humans are simply too disruptive for it. Even the smallest human impact could alter decades of scientific observation. A single introduced species could reshape the entire ecological development of the island. What scientists are studying is not just a place, but a process, a rare window into how nature builds ecosystems from nothing. Protecting that process means keeping the island almost completely isolated from human presence. And so Surtsey remains one of the few places on Earth where humanity has intentionally stepped back, choosing observation over occupation. In a world where nearly every corner of the planet has been explored, settled, or transformed, this small volcanic island stands as a reminder that some places are more valuable untouched. Because sometimes the greatest discovery is not what humans can build on new land, but what nature can create when humans are not there.